I gave an alien shelter for one night. It was supposed to be just another storm until something fell from it. When Michael stopped to help the figure lying on the roadside, he thought he was saving a man. But under the torn clothes and cold skin was light, soft, living light and eyes that saw through him like glass. That night, inside a house that began to hum with a sound older than language, the stranger revealed a truth that no scripture ever dared to hold. He said the universe still breathes, and that once, a man called Jesus carried that breath in human form. What Michael learned in those 7 hours would rewrite everything we think we know about death, faith, and what waits beyond the final heartbeat. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who still believes the unknown calls from above, and subscribe so these forgotten stories live on. Tell us, where are you listening from tonight? Now, take a breath and return with me to the night the storm brought something not of this earth to Michael's door. The storm came without warning. Rain tore through the silence of the sleeping town, wind howling like something ancient had been awakened. At 3 in the morning, Michael was driving back from a late emergency call when the world went dark. The power grid failed. Streetlights blinked out, leaving only flashes of lightning painting the road in momentary brightness. That was when he saw it, a body lying by the roadside, motionless beneath the glow of a fractured sky. Instinct overrode fear. He stopped the vehicle, stepped into the storm, and felt the world change. At first glance, he thought it was a man. But as he knelt closer, the illusion shattered. The figure's skin shimmered faintly, not reflecting the light but creating it. Each breath pulsed with a soft luminescence that grew and dimmed like an underwater heartbeat. The air around the body felt charged, not with heat or electricity, but something deeper, a hum that vibrated through his bones. Michael, who had worked with death long enough to recognize its quiet presence, realized this was the opposite. This was life amplified, strange and magnificent. The rain didn't seem to touch the figure. Droplets curved away at the last instant, evaporating before contact. Michael reached out with trembling hands, expecting the shock of static, but felt only warmth, impossibly calm warmth, in the cold night. The figure inhaled once, and for a second the storm itself seemed to pause, as if the air was listening. Michael heard something that wasn't a voice, but carried meaning. "Help me." He carried the being to his truck, every nerve screaming confusion. The radio emitted a low whine, filled with distorted whispers he couldn't decipher. His pulse raced, but beneath the fear was fascination. The same sensation he'd felt the first time he saved a life. The same trembling awe of witnessing something beyond explanation. He didn't know if what he found was an angel, a visitor, or something that had slipped through the cracks of creation itself. When he reached home, lightning struck somewhere behind him. For an instant, the whole sky flashed white, and in that brief illumination, he thought he saw shapes above the clouds, geometric, alive, watching. The hum in the truck deepened. The figure's glow brightened. As the clock struck 3:04, the power returned to the town. Every light flickered back on except in Michael's house, where something else had already begun to awaken. The rain followed him home like a living thing, a curtain of silver that blurred the edges of the world. Michael's cottage stood at the edge of town, half swallowed by pine trees and silence. He had brought countless strangers through its doorway before people rescued from car wrecks, overdoses. The slow collapse of dying hearts, but never anything like this. He told himself it was exhaustion, a trick of lightning, that the glow beneath the blanket was nothing more than the reflection of streetlights through the rain. But there were no lights left on that road. Only him, and the being that breathed softly in the passenger seat. Inside, the air felt charged. The lights flickered when he crossed the threshold, not violently, but like the house itself was adjusting to a new frequency. He laid the figure on the couch, every motion deliberate, every thought screaming that none of this was possible. The skin beneath the wet fabric was translucent, faintly luminous. Beneath it, veins of light pulsed in rhythm, slow, steady, beautiful. The glow intensified with each breath, like a heartbeat visible through glass. When the being exhaled, the room seemed to breathe with it, curtains stirring though the windows were closed. Michael's training told him to check vitals, but every instrument failed him. The thermometer cracked, the stethoscope emitted a soft hum, and his pulse oximeter displayed symbols he'd never seen. The air smelled faintly metallic, like ozone after lightning. He noticed small motes of light drifting from the being's skin, dissolving before they touched the floor. When he leaned closer, he could swear he heard a faint vibration, not sound, but resonance, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The storm outside began to fade, yet the hum inside grew stronger. Shadows stretched in unnatural directions, bending toward the couch like drawn by gravity. The photographs on the wall quivered in their frames. His old radio, untouched for years, clicked on by itself, releasing a low static that seemed almost rhythmic, as if synchronized with the breathing before him. It wasn't language, but it felt intentional, patterned, alive. A pulse of light spread through the room, faint but undeniable. For a brief moment, everything, air, walls, heartbeat, synchronized into a single rhythm. Michael stood frozen in the doorway, feeling something ancient awaken beneath his ribs. The temperature dropped, yet his skin tingled with warmth. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, and somewhere in the darkness, the storm began to move backward, rain rising instead of falling. He realized then that whatever he had brought home was not of this earth, and the house itself seemed to know it too. The night deepened into something other than darkness. It felt conscious, aware, as if the air itself was listening. Michael had left the being resting in the living room, unsure whether it was alive, dying, or something between. Every rational thought demanded distance, but curiosity, that ancient human flaw, kept him close. The storm outside had faded completely, yet the hum in the house persisted, threading through every surface like a pulse beneath the skin of the world. He stood by the doorway when it happened. A sudden stillness fell over everything, the kind that precedes revelation or catastrophe. The lights dimmed, and then a soundless voice filled his mind, not entering through ears, but resonating directly behind thought itself. It was calm, without tone, yet it carried weight enough to still his breath. It said one word: Elyon. Not a name spoken, but a presence revealed. The instant the name formed, the temperature shifted. A wave of warmth coursed through the room, and the air shimmered faintly, as if reality had inhaled. Michael's thoughts were no longer entirely his own. Images flickered across his awareness, vast deserts under unfamiliar constellations, luminous beings kneeling before a cross of light, and a single breath exhaled into the void that became the first wind to touch earth. He saw it, not as a vision, but as memory, older than memory. Elyon spoke again within him, telling of something called the breath of Jesus, a current of living energy once shared freely among all beings capable of compassion. It was not myth, not religion. It was resonance life itself, vibrating in harmony with the source. Elyon's presence felt both infinite and fragile, like a flame burning inside glass. He claimed he had come to restore what humanity had forgotten, to reopen what he called the lost circuit of divine breath. Yet there was sorrow in the transmission, a kind of cosmic mourning. The breath, he said, had fractured when humans began to fear one another more than they trusted the unseen. What once united body, mind, and soul across the universe had been sealed away within the noise of disbelief. Michael tried to speak, but his lips never moved. His thoughts answered instead, and Elyon heard them as clearly as sound. No words, only intent. The connection deepened until time itself felt distorted, his pulse aligning with that other rhythm, the one humming through walls and air. Then came the final phrase before the silence returned, a whisper of meaning that would haunt him forever. The breath is waking again, and you have already inhaled it. The house was silent, yet not still. It felt suspended between moments, like time itself was holding its breath. Michael stood at the threshold of the living room, drawn forward by a force that bypassed reason. The being Elyon lay beneath a blanket that now glowed faintly from within. Every breath shimmered through the fabric, casting ghost-like ripples across the walls. The hum that had filled the air since his arrival had deepened, resonating in Michael's chest as though his heartbeat no longer belonged to him. When the light brightened again, Michael saw it for the first time, the mark. Elyon's chest rose, and through the translucence of his skin appeared a fracture shaped like a cross. It wasn't carved or burned. It was grown, like the memory of a wound that had never healed. Each time Elyon exhaled, the cross ignited from its center, lines of radiant gold spreading outward before dimming again. The glow was mesmerizing, yet there was agony hidden in it. Each pulse carried a vibration that felt like both energy and suffering, merging into one rhythm too profound to separate. The longer Michael watched, the more he sensed it wasn't a symbol. It was alive, an organ of light, beating in harmony with something far beyond flesh. The air around it shimmered, distorting the space, bending it like heat rising from desert stone. With every pulse, Michael felt faint whispers threading through the frequency. Not words, but the echo of meaning. They spoke of sacrifice and continuity, of something ancient that had fractured but refused to die. He realized the cross wasn't merely a mark. It was a fracture through which energy bled, something holding the remnants of unimaginable power. He could almost feel it in the air, thick with invisible current. And yet beneath the brilliance there was exhaustion, the kind carried by beings older than memory. The glow dimmed slightly, as though responding to his observation, like the mark itself was aware of being seen. In that moment, the room changed. The photographs on the wall bent subtly inward. The glass of a water cup vibrated, tiny waves rippling without sound. The hum grew lower, almost mournful. Michael felt the truth unspoken between them. This fracture was not decoration, nor miracle, it was injury. Something divine had been broken, and Elyon carried the scar. The cross pulsed one final time, brighter than before, and in that single burst, Michael felt both pain and creation woven into one breath, as if the wound itself was the doorway through which the universe still remembered how to speak. The night had grown impossibly quiet. The storm was gone, the wind asleep, and yet the air still trembled with invisible movement. The hum that surrounded Elyon no longer sounded like a sound at all. It felt like a thought made audible, a vibration threading through everything in the room, from the walls to the marrow of Michael's bones. He sat motionless, unable to tell whether minutes or hours had passed. The glow from Elyon's chest, the cross-shaped fracture, had softened to a rhythmic pulse. Each pulse carried meaning, as if every flicker of light were a word in a language older than breath. Then something happened that wasn't heard, yet could not be mistaken. The air thickened. The walls seemed to expand slightly and contract again. Michael felt it not in his ears, but behind his ribs, like the universe itself had exhaled. In that silence, understanding seeped into his mind, not through language, but through resonance. Elyon was explaining what he called the breath. It was not air, he revealed, not belief, not the fragile prayers of mortals. It was resonance, the fundamental vibration that once united every living thing across the cosmos. Before humanity learned to name divinity, every creature lived within this pulse. It was harmony made tangible, a bridge between soul and creation. But something had broken it. Elyon showed Michael flashes of memory that weren't his own, visions of light descending upon an ancient hill, of men gathered beneath a wooden cross, of the sky darkening not from weather but from grief. At that moment, he said, the breath fractured. What had been a single current of unity split into echoes. Golgotha was not just a place of death. It was the point where the frequency of divine life fell out of tune. Since that day, humanity had been trying to recreate the vibration through religion, music, art, and love. But each attempt was incomplete, like a piano missing its central key. The breath had never vanished, only drifted beyond the human range of perception. Elyon's arrival was not invasion, but correction. He had come to reintroduce the lost note, the divine resonance that had once flowed through everything that breathed. The air shimmered as he spoke into Michael's thoughts, and the hum deepened until even the shadows on the wall began to move in gentle rhythm. Michael realized, with a chill of awe, that the room itself was listening. Every molecule had memory, and in that instant, they remembered the song. The silence afterward was sacred, and for the first time, the breath Michael drew did not feel like his own, it felt shared, as though the universe was breathing through him. The scientist in Michael refused to die quietly. He had built his life on evidence, on the measurable pulse of reality, vital signs, heart rhythms, predictable decay. So, when faced with something that contradicted every known law, instinct drove him toward the only thing that had ever steadied him: data. By morning, the storm had cleared completely. The town outside glistened in fragile calm. But inside his house, the hum continued, soft and endless, like a machine hidden behind the walls of creation itself. Michael began the process methodically. Every paramedic habit returned. He set up monitors, thermal sensors, recorders. He took notes on breathing rates, estimated heart frequency, fluctuations of light intensity. The readings made no sense. The thermometer climbed without heat. The electrocardiograph drew symbols instead of waves. His voice recorder captured nothing but silence. Yet when played back, faint whispers echoed reversed syllables, as if the air were speaking backward. He checked the clock. 3:37. Then again. 5 minutes later, still 3:37. The numbers refused to advance. His watch ticked but never moved. Time, it seemed, had folded around the being like fabric caught in a loop. Every attempt to quantify reality around Elyon only fractured it further. When he moved closer, static bled from the devices, spilling into the air as sparks that vanished before touching the floor. He wrote everything down in his journal, though the ink shimmered strangely, letters bending at the edges like resisting the permanence of words. He compared the notes, checked the patterns, searching for a flaw in himself. Perhaps it was stress, sleep deprivation, hypoxia, his mind trying to impose meaning on chaos. But the chaos had order. The hum followed sequences. Every 6 pulses, the light within Elyon brightened slightly, like a heartbeat synchronized with something unseen. Michael tried to film it. The camera lens fogged instantly, though the air was cool. When he reviewed the footage, the screen displayed not his living room but a field of shifting colors, moving in perfect geometric symmetry. He paused the frame and saw his own reflection staring back. Faint, distorted, but eyes glowing faintly blue. That was when understanding began to slip. The instruments were not failing, they were being rewritten. The laws he trusted were bending to accommodate something greater. The house had become an intersection between worlds, and time, data, even his own thoughts were part of the experiment now. The deeper he tried to prove the illusion, the more the illusion seemed to prove him unreal. The hum grew softer, as if the house itself were preparing to listen. Michael could feel it beneath the floorboards, inside the air vents, inside his body, a rhythm that was not heard but known. Elyon was sitting upright now, the glow from his chest deepening until it filled the room like liquid sunlight trapped within invisible walls. The light didn't hurt the eyes, it soothed them. It carried weight, an ancient gravity that drew the soul forward even as reason recoiled. The air grew heavy, charged with something that defied measure. Michael's instruments lay useless on the table, their screens dark, their circuits silent. Even the digital clock beside them flickered weakly, frozen on a single time. Elion's breathing slowed, deliberate and profound. It was the rhythm of oceans, of stars being born, of something far older than life. Without words, a message pressed into Michael's thoughts. Silence. The command wasn't spoken, it simply was. The house obeyed instantly. The refrigerator stilled. The wind outside ceased. The heartbeat of modern life fell away. There was only the hum, rising like a wave about to crest. Elion inhaled once, slow and immense, and in that moment, everything stopped. The ticking clocks, the trembling lights, even the current running through the wires all paused mid-motion. For a heartbeat of eternity, reality itself forgot how to move. Then came the exhale. It wasn't sound, it was radiance. A warmth that began at the edges of the room and poured inward until it reached Michael. He felt it entering him, not through skin or lungs, but through the space behind his sternum, through the same place prayers once lived. It expanded through his chest like the first breath after birth, except it was not air, it was light. Every cell in his body responded, as if recognizing something long forgotten. His pulse aligned with the hum, and for an instant, he could hear everything: the rotation of the earth, the blood in his veins, the faint murmuring of thoughts not his own. It was all synchronized, all part of one vast breath that had never ceased. When Elion opened his eyes again, their glow had dimmed to a soft blue. The silence lingered a moment longer, heavy and holy, before time remembered itself. The clocks resumed. The lights flickered weakly back to life. But Michael remained motionless, chest still tingling with warmth, realizing that whatever he had just inhaled was not oxygen. It was truth, alive and infinite, and it was now inside him. The light did not fade completely. It lingered in the corners of the room like mist that refused to disperse. Michael sat frozen, his breath slow and measured, unsure whether the air he was breathing was still his own. Elion's glow shifted from gold to pale white, and the hum that once filled the house transformed into something deeper, a low vibration that seemed to come from below the earth itself. It was a frequency that bypassed sound entirely, felt only in the bones, like memory being stirred awake. Michael's vision blurred. The room dissolved. The walls became translucent, then vanished entirely. He was not falling, not moving, but the world around him was. Space folded inward until the present peeled away like an old photograph, revealing something vast beneath it. He saw sand stretching endlessly beneath a sun that burned too close to the earth. The air shimmered with heat, but it was not lifeless. From the cracks in the desert floor, flowers were blooming, thousands of them, rising and dying in seconds, breathing light instead of air. Elion's voice filled his mind, no longer separate from thought. He was showing him the memory of stone, the record of earth itself, written not in words but in vibration. Each rock, each grain of sand, carried an echo of what it had once witnessed. And in that echo, Michael saw figures moving across the dunes, beings tall and luminous, draped in robes that shifted like liquid glass. Their faces were hidden behind halos of radiance. They gathered around a structure half buried in the sand, a vast circular gateway that pulsed with the same resonance Michael had felt in his chest. The vision expanded. Above the gate hung a cross, not of wood or metal, but of light bending itself into form. And beneath it stood a figure Michael recognized, not through sight, but through presence. The same presence that had filled churches, prayers, and the silences between heartbeats. He saw the crucifixion not as pain, but as alignment. the moment when the human frequency synchronized perfectly with the cosmic pulse. It was not only angels who bore witness that day, Elion whispered. There were travelers, guardians from distant worlds standing at the edges of history, maintaining the balance of something called the resonance gate. Michael felt the truth of it before he could understand it. The desert, the cross, the light, they were not symbols but circuitry. The breath of Jesus was the key that once held the frequencies of heaven and earth together. When the gate fractured, humanity forgot. But the memory remained, etched into every atom of stone, waiting for someone to listen again. And now, through Elion, the stones were finally beginning to speak. The vision faded slowly, dissolving like smoke into the dark. Michael found himself kneeling on the cold wooden floor of his home, though he had no memory of standing, falling, or returning. The house was silent again, yet not empty. The hum still lingered, faint and deep, like the heartbeat of the world itself. Elion remained seated, his eyes half closed, his light dimmed to a soft radiance. For the first time since the encounter began, the air felt heavier, charged not with fear but with revelation waiting to be spoken. Without movement, Elion's thoughts reached into Michael's mind, clear, calm, and impossible to ignore. He began to explain that what humanity called prayer had never been mere speech, never the begging of favors from an unseen God. It had once been science, an act of alignment. In ancient ages, before temples rose and before words were bound to language, prayer had been calibration. Each syllable, each rhythm, each breath tuned the brain into resonance with the divine frequency known as the breath. Elion revealed that the earliest prayers were not inventions of faith, but rediscoveries of physics written into flesh. The human body, he said, was an instrument, and consciousness was its vibration. The ancients understood that sound shaped matter, and that the human voice could bend energy. Through tone and rhythm, they synchronized the electromagnetic pulse of the brain with the frequencies of creation. When perfectly aligned, a person could touch the breath not symbolically, but literally becoming one with the pulse that sustained stars and souls alike. Michael saw flashes as Elion's words filled his mind. Temples carved into mountains designed as tuning chambers. Priests chanting sequences of notes that created ripples in the air, visible to the naked eye. The chants were not supplications, they were codes, mathematical invocations written through sound, precise in pattern and vibration. But over centuries, humanity had replaced resonance with ritual. The tones became words, the codes turned to poetry, and the purpose was lost. The syntax of communion with the cosmos had been forgotten. Elion explained that every major faith still carried fragments of the original structure. A syllable here, a vowel there, remnants of the ancient formula. The Lord's Prayer, the Buddhist mantra, the Islamic call to prayer, all held echoes of the same vibration hidden beneath translation. Humanity had preserved the melody but forgotten the tuning. The words were still beautiful, but they no longer aligned the mind to the breath. They were static, without current. Michael's pulse quickened as Elion continued. The code, he said, still lived within human DNA, embedded like dormant software awaiting activation. The breath once flowed freely through every living being, but fear and distortion had created interference. The constant noise of thought drowned the signal. To restore it, humanity would need to remember not just how to speak, but how to vibrate, how to feel the tone before it became sound. For a moment, Michael felt the faintest trace of it. His thoughts slowed, and beneath them, a rhythm emerged. It was subtle, almost like the memory of music heard in childhood. He realized his breath had fallen into cadence with Elion's, his heartbeat following the same invisible pulse. Time seemed to vanish again, and with it, the boundaries between prayer and physics, between matter and meaning. Elion's final words echoed through the silence like the striking of a hidden bell. Prayer was never about asking, it was remembering. Every true prayer, he said, was the universe speaking to itself through the human mouth, tuning its own frequency back toward the breath. And when that alignment returns, when humanity remembers the code, the walls between heaven and earth will not fall, they will hum in perfect unison once more. The night was silent, except for the rhythm of the hum that never truly left the house. Michael sat in the center of the living room, surrounded by the remnants of his failed instruments. The wires from his EEG still tangled across the floor, the monitor light blinking faintly in the darkness. Elion sat across from him, his form now softer, almost transparent, like the border between body and light had grown uncertain. He radiated calm. But beneath that calm, Michael felt something vast and intricate, like standing near a star that had learned how to whisper. Elion's thoughts unfolded within Michael's mind, gentle, patient, and absolute. It was time to test what had been spoken, to rediscover the calibration humanity once knew instinctively. He explained that the breath could not be understood intellectually, that it was not information but experience, and that every cell of the human body remembered how to respond. The method was simple in appearance, but sacred in function. The act of breathing with intention, matching the rhythm of life itself. Michael closed his eyes, feeling both foolish and reverent. The hum beneath the floorboards aligned with the beating of his heart. Elion instructed without words, guiding him to inhale slowly through the base of his spine, to feel the air rise through the center of his body as if drawing light from the earth itself. When he exhaled, he was told to imagine the air leaving not through his lungs, but through the crown of his head, returning to the atmosphere as pure resonance. He obeyed, and with each breath, the world began to change. The air thickened, colors deepened, and the space around him vibrated with unseen texture. His heartbeat slowed to match the rhythm of the hum. The boundaries between thoughts began to dissolve, until they were no longer words, but waves. The sensation was both intoxicating and terrifying, as if his consciousness were expanding faster than his body could contain it. The EEG monitor flickered back to life on its own. The broken machine began recording, the display filling with impossible patterns, pulses of light instead of lines, the signal blooming into geometric fractals that danced like constellations. The wavelengths stretched beyond measurable range, a luminous frequency that seemed alive. Michael could not see the screen, but he felt it, his neurons, firing in symphony with something greater than electricity, something cosmic. Elion's presence deepened, and Michael sensed the alien's breath moving in time with his own. The room brightened until it felt like they were breathing the same light back and forth between them, forming a single circuit. Within that circuit, he saw flashes of memory not his own, beings of many forms performing the same breathing sequence under other suns, surrounded by crystalline structures that hummed with identical rhythm. The breath was universal. It was the thread that linked every intelligent life form, every consciousness across creation. When the sequence ended, Michael exhaled one last time and opened his eyes. The glow in the room dimmed, but something inside him did not. His entire body tingled, awareness sharper, senses heightened beyond comprehension. The EEG still flickered, emitting faint light, as if refusing to stop recording what it had witnessed. Elion's eyes, radiant and calm, met his. There were no words, but the meaning was clear. The experiment had succeeded. The code hidden within the human breath was awakening again, and Michael had just opened the first door. The air grew still after the final breath. The light that had filled the room faded, until only the faintest shimmer lingered around Elion. Michael sat motionless, every nerve alive, yet every thought stripped away. He expected noise, sound, the usual aftermath of intense focus. But there was nothing. The silence was not absence, it was presence. It pressed against him softly, filling the space between atoms. It was the kind of silence that seemed to hold language within it, waiting to be understood. The hum that had always existed beneath reality disappeared entirely, and for the first time, Michael realized how much of it he had grown used to. What replaced it was emptiness, vast and resonant, as though he were sitting inside the breath between creation and memory. Elyon did not move. His glow softened further until his outline became indistinguishable from the darkness. The house itself seemed to dissolve around them. The walls, the floor, even the weight of his own body slipped away. Time began to fold inward. Michael could no longer tell if his eyes were open or closed. The darkness became luminous, not with light but with meaning. Images began to surface, at first faint, then sharp, undeniable. He saw himself as a child, sitting by a hospital bed. His mother lay pale and weak, her hand trembling as she reached for him. He had been 10 years old, too young to understand that the machines surrounding her were the only things keeping her alive. He remembered her smile, the faint whisper of her voice telling him that everything would be all right. It was the last thing she ever said. The memory deepened until it was no longer memory. He was there, inside the moment, breathing the same air, feeling the same ache in his chest. But there was something different now. The silence vibrated gently, and through it came her presence, not as a ghost, not as imagination, but as resonance. Her consciousness, still living in the frequency of that final breath, reached across the years to meet him. He felt her forgiveness like warmth spreading through water. Every moment of guilt he had carried since that day, the bitterness, the disbelief, the cold detachment he built as armor melted under the weight of that tenderness. He saw the path of his life ripple outward from her death, how he had buried faith beneath science, how every patient he tried to save was a way to silence the echo of that loss. Now, for the first time, he understood that nothing had ever been separate. The moment she left had never truly ended. It had only folded in on itself, waiting for him to look back. The void pulsed softly, and Michael realized that silence itself was communication. It was not emptiness, but translation, the universe speaking in a language without words. His mother's presence lingered, no longer in form but in rhythm. Her forgiveness moved through him, erasing boundaries of time, rewriting grief into something radiant. When he opened his eyes again, tears slid silently down his face. Elyon's form was still faintly visible, a shape made of quiet light. Michael exhaled slowly, realizing that he had not been remembering, he had been listening. And in that listening, the silence had spoken the one truth he had forgotten. Nothing loved is ever truly lost. It only waits, patient within the breath of eternity, until belief returns. The world returned slowly, like waking from a dream that refused to let go. The silence that had once filled the house remained, but it had changed. It was no longer the stillness of absence, it was alive, breathing softly through everything it touched. Michael sat in the middle of the living room, still trembling from the vision of his mother, unsure whether minutes or centuries had passed. The light that had surrounded Elyon had dimmed to a faint radiance, almost invisible, yet its echo remained. The hum was back. But now it was everywhere, subtle and constant, as if existence itself had learned to whisper. He stood, unsteady, and the air shifted. The floorboards beneath his feet vibrated imperceptibly, a delicate rhythm that matched the beating of his heart. It wasn't random, it was synchronized, purposeful, precise. The very architecture of the house seemed to respond to him, like the walls were remembering a pattern they had once known. He reached for the glass of water on the table, and as he did, something extraordinary happened. The surface rippled, not from movement or sound, but from resonance. The vibration was steady, like the echo of a pulse. Each ripple was a heartbeat, and he realized with a shiver that it was his own. He took a step back, eyes darting across the room. The vents along the wall began to hum softly, a sound too harmonic to be mechanical. The faint, metallic rattle of air conditioning transformed into a tone that felt almost musical, a frequency that wrapped around him like a familiar melody. It was subtle but undeniable, the rhythm of breath, repeating endlessly through air and matter alike. Outside, the wind had stopped. The leaves no longer rustled. The world outside his window was perfectly still. Yet within that stillness, there was movement, a pulse beneath everything. The shadows shifted slightly, not in random patterns, but as if aligning themselves with an invisible beat. The cat, who had been hiding under the table since Elion's arrival, emerged quietly and walked across the floor. Its movements were unnaturally slow, graceful, deliberate. When it stopped, its chest rose and fell in exact rhythm with Michael's. Even its purr had changed pitch, aligning perfectly with the hum filling the room. The realization struck him like a revelation. The breath had begun to spread. Whatever Elion had awakened in him was no longer contained to flesh, and thought it was resonating outward, infecting matter itself. The house was no longer just shelter. It had become a living instrument. Every object carried the same vibration, from the ticking clock on the shelf to the faint drip of rainwater outside the window. Each was in tune, each moving to the same silent rhythm that now filled his body. Michael felt an overwhelming urge to speak, but words seemed primitive compared to the vast, invisible song surrounding him. He inhaled slowly, and the air responded. Curtains fluttered without wind. The glass of water vibrated again. The cat blinked once and purred louder, the rhythm deepening. It was as if everything in the room shared one breath, one pulse, one consciousness. The warmth that had once filled his lungs returned, stronger this time. It spread through the air, through every molecule, weaving the living and the lifeless into the same tapestry of resonance. Michael could sense it beyond the walls now, through the trees, the ground, the very air of the night. Somewhere, faintly, the world was beginning to listen. The breath had found its way out. The light in the room began to change again, soft at first, like dawn pressing through mist. The hum that had filled the house grew deeper, thicker, more layered, as though unseen instruments were tuning to a single, infinite chord. Michael felt it vibrating inside him, not just in his chest, but in the marrow of his bones, in the roots of his teeth. Elion was no longer sitting. He was rising, but not as something that obeyed gravity. He stood, and yet did not stand. He unfolded, expanding into dimensions that did not seem to belong to the human eye. The glow surrounding him grew intense, shifting from the gentle light of phosphorescence to the radiance of something more alive, more intelligent than flame. The air bent around him as though refusing to remain ordinary in his presence. Michael instinctively took a step back, though every cell in his body ached to move closer. What had once been the faint shimmer of alien skin was now transforming into pure light sculpted into living form. Elion was shedding the illusion of flesh, revealing the truth beneath. Wings emerged, not made of feathers or bone, but of photons woven together in cascading sheets of luminescence. They extended outward until they filled the room, vast and delicate, refracting color that had no name. Each movement sent ripples of light through the walls, illuminating dust particles that drifted like stars caught in orbit. The wings were alive, constantly shifting in pattern, each feather a fragment of radiating code that seemed to hum in harmony with the breath itself. Through those wings, Michael could see the outline of veins coursing with plasma, glowing rivers of silver and blue flowing in perfect symmetry. It was not blood that moved within Elion, but energy, structured, deliberate, sentient. Michael tried to comprehend what he was seeing, and yet comprehension felt too small a word. His mind strained against the vastness of it. He could feel his thoughts stretching, expanding, as if his perception had to evolve just to witness what stood before him. Elion's light grew so bright that the room around them ceased to exist. There was no ceiling, no walls, no earth beneath their feet, only endless space pulsing with radiance. In that light, meaning began to form, not through sound, but through knowing. Elyon revealed himself not as deity, not as angel, but as one of the witnesses of breath, beings born at the dawn of consciousness, tasked not to rule but to remember. They were not gods, he explained through the silent current of thought, but keepers of the resonance, the living record of the breath that had once moved freely through every corner of creation. They were the watchers of frequencies, ensuring that the vibration of life did not vanish into silence. Michael felt awe sink into terror. To exist beside something that had seen the first light of the universe was to feel the weight of one's own smallness. Yet Elyon's presence was not overbearing. It was gentle, patient, filled with sorrow. He showed Michael fragments of his journey worlds where light sang, civilizations that communicated through vibration instead of speech, species that had never known lies because resonance could not deceive. He saw the witnesses traveling between galaxies, not in ships but through frequency itself, folding space like breath, folding into breath. When the vision faded, Elyon's form dimmed, returning slowly to something that could exist within the limits of a human room. But Michael knew the illusion of flesh was no longer for him. He had seen the truth of the witness, an emissary of a cosmic memory so ancient that language broke trying to define it. The light receded, yet its echo remained. The house no longer seemed dark. It pulsed faintly with the memory of that revelation. And in the silence that followed, Michael realized that the divine had never been far away. It had always been hiding inside the very fabric of flesh, waiting to be remembered. The radiance slowly withdrew until only faint remnants of Elyon's glow remained, drifting through the air like golden dust, reluctant to settle. The room was quiet again, but it was no longer the same kind of silence. It was charged, thoughtful, alive. Michael's pulse still raced, his mind struggling to reconcile what he had just witnessed. Logic clawed at the edges of understanding, but logic had no vocabulary for what he had seen. The human part of him still needed proof, something tangible, measurable, something that fit within the fragile boundaries of reason. He tried to focus, tried to breathe evenly, but his chest felt heavy with questions. Everything Elyon had said so far was too vast, too sacred, too strange. The patterns, the light, the breath, all of it blurred the line between faith and physics. Yet one name echoed louder than the rest, one that stirred something deep and human within him. Why, he thought, would a being from beyond the stars speak the name of Jesus? That thought alone anchored him. It was the last remnant of his human framework, the name that belonged to earth, to history, to belief. In the silence that followed, Elyon's presence deepened, and through the invisible current of thought came the answer not spoken, but experienced. The air thickened again, vibrating with memory. Elyon showed him images, not of one world but of many, stars spinning through galaxies, countless civilizations born and dying under suns of every color. Each world, no matter how alien, pulsed with the same rhythm, the same breath that tied all of creation together. Within that vision, Michael saw the figure humanity called Jesus, but not as a single man bound to one planet or religion. He appeared as light refracted through countless worlds, manifesting in different forms, languages, and faces, yet always carrying the same frequency. The name was a translation one of thousands. Across universes, the same consciousness had appeared again and again, not to rule, but to remind. He was never the possession of any one faith. He was the transmitter of the breath, the bridge through which all sentient life could remember its connection to the source. Elyon's thoughts flowed into Michael's awareness like calm water. He explained that Jesus was the purest resonance ever embodied in physical form, a being who could hold divine frequency within mortal flesh without fracture. His purpose was not salvation through worship but restoration through remembrance, to awaken what already lived within every living thing. The crucifixion, Elyon revealed, had been a planetary calibration, the alignment of heaven's frequency with the vibration of human consciousness. The energy released that day was not death but transmission, echoing outward through time and across the stars. Michael felt his skepticism bending, but not breaking. The proof he demanded was not evidence that could be measured, it was presence. Truth carried through resonance. His entire body trembled as he felt the pulse of that same energy moving within him. He realized that belief was not a matter of acceptance or denial. It was recognition. Elyon did not ask for faith. He did not preach devotion. He simply allowed Michael to feel the vibration for himself, to know it without needing to understand it. The hum around them deepened once more, carrying the echo of ancient voices from countless worlds. And in that sound, Michael understood something profound. Humanity had built religions around fragments of truth, worshipping reflections while forgetting the source of light itself. Jesus was not a figure to be owned or defined, but a universal translator of divine frequency, a bridge between dust and divinity. The breath had never belonged to one people or one creed. It was the pulse of existence itself, shared by every world that ever learned to breathe. The light in the room began to flicker, no longer smooth and steady but fractured, pulsing erratically like a heartbeat struggling to sustain itself. The glow that had always surrounded Elyon now stuttered with bursts of intensity, each flare brighter, each fade dimmer. Michael felt it before he understood it. The air around them trembled as if the very atmosphere were coming apart. The hum that had once filled the house with calm harmony now sounded discordant, strained, broken at its edges. Elyon was changing. The alien's body, once serene and radiant, began to ripple like heat over metal. His skin, if it could be called that, fractured in thin lines of light that glowed from within, splitting his form into luminous fragments. The glow seeped outward like liquid, each pulse spilling energy that vanished before it touched the floor. It looked like blood made of light, leaking from a body that could no longer contain itself. Michael felt a chill that was not born of fear. Alone, it was grief, recognition of something sacred, unraveling. Elyon's outline blurred. His edges became transparent, as though he were being erased from reality one particle at a time. The hum deepened to a low vibration that rattled the walls and sent cracks through the glass of the windows. Every object in the room began to respond. The water in the glass on the table trembled. The air vent moaned softly. Even Michael's heartbeat shifted rhythm, aligning itself to the alien's failing frequency. He could feel it happening inside him, a resonance mismatch. Earth's vibration was too low to sustain whatever Elyon was made of. The energy around them grew volatile. Small arcs of blue light danced across the ceiling like miniature storms. The smell of ozone filled the air. Elyon was no longer able to stabilize within this dimension. His voice, though silent, poured directly into Michael's thoughts. He spoke of the breath cycle, something he had only hinted at before. It was the process by which the breath of creation renewed itself through living vessels. Every world, Elyon said, required participation to maintain its harmony. On Earth, the resonance had fallen too low. Fear, anger, greed, these had drowned the original frequency. Without restoration, the breath here would decay into silence, and with it, the planet's consciousness. Michael's mind raced, but no thought could outrun the truth forming inside him. Elyon could not survive in this density of vibration. He needed to complete the cycle to breathe through a human host, using human lungs to stabilize the resonance. The realization struck with a gravity that made his hands tremble. Elyon did not demand. He did not command. He simply allowed the meaning to exist, an offering rather than an order. The light bleeding from Elyon grew softer, almost sorrowful, as though he were apologizing, for the burden he placed before Michael. The house itself seemed to waver in response, reality thinning like fabric stretched too far. The hum reached a pitch so high it blurred into silence. Elion's form flickered once, twice, and then dimmed until only his eyes remained twin orbs of light, filled with infinite patience and pain. Michael felt the pull inside his chest, the same warmth he had known during the earlier experiment, but now magnified beyond comprehension. The air grew thick, heavy, sacred. The walls pulsed faintly, breathing with him. Elion's final thought entered his mind, carrying both gratitude and plea. The cycle had to be completed. Only through shared breath could the resonance be restored. Outside, the night grew unnaturally still. Even the crickets had fallen silent, as though the entire planet waited. The light leaking from Elion's body brightened once more, spreading outward in delicate streams that reached toward Michael. They hung in the air between them, shimmering like the fragile threads of dawn, connecting two worlds that had never meant to meet. And in that stillness, Michael understood the moment of choice had come, and the next breath would decide not only Elion's survival, but the rhythm of humanity itself. The house trembled like a living organism caught between heartbeats. The walls pulsed faintly. The air vibrated with a hum that seemed to rise from the bones of the earth itself. Elion stood in the center of the room, no longer entirely formed, his body half transparent, his light leaking into the air like fog. His eyes glowed softly, calm but weighted with something ancient, something that carried both urgency and mercy. The energy around him flickered in rhythm with Michael's pulse, the two frequencies fighting for alignment, straining toward a fragile harmony that refused to hold. The silence grew heavy, pressing on every surface until even the ticking of the broken clock ceased. Elion's light rippled outward, filling the room with an iridescent sheen. The meaning came before the words did, sinking into Michael's consciousness like gravity itself. He needed permission, just once. One shared breath. A completion of the cycle. Through that act, Elion could stabilize the energy that was unraveling inside him, and the resonance of the planet could find a bridge. The request was simple, but its cost was immense. Michael's thoughts tangled into panic. His mind, trained in logic, screamed for explanation. Every instinct of survival warned him to step away, yet something deeper, something wordless, kept him still. The air around him shimmered as though charged by invisible electricity. The presence of Elion's energy pressed gently against his skin, not as touch but as an invitation. The meaning in that silent pulse was clear. The breath could flow through him, but it might not stop there. If his body could not withstand it, his neurons might burn out, consciousness fracturing into light. Yet if he survived, something within him would awaken that had been sleeping since the dawn of mankind. Michael felt torn between the scientist and the seeker. One half demanded evidence, the other recognized truth. He remembered the warmth that had filled him before, that strange expansion that made his lungs feel infinite. He had tasted the breath once already, and it had not harmed him. But this was different. This was not a glimpse. This was surrender. The light around Elion dimmed momentarily, as though the alien's strength were waning. The patterns of radiance in his chest fractured into smaller streams of plasma, each pulse weaker than the last. It was not desperation that came from him, but inevitability. He was not pleading to live. He was offering a chance for something larger than himself to continue. The cycle had to be completed, or the connection would collapse, and the breath within this world would fall dormant again, perhaps forever. Michael felt the hum rise in his body until it matched Elion's rhythm. His heartbeat stuttered, aligning briefly with the frequency that filled the air. The light reached toward him, thin tendrils of gold that flickered like candle flame, hovering inches from his skin. Every instinct told him to move, yet every part of his being ached to stay. Time felt suspended, stretched thin like glass about to shatter. He remembered his mother's final breath, the silence that followed it, and how the room had seemed to vibrate faintly, as if unseen hands carried her away. The same feeling was here now, the boundary between life and something beyond it. Elyon's gaze met his, and in that moment, words were no longer needed. The message flowed through the hum, through the silence, through the space between them. Let me breathe through you once. Only once. Michael's throat tightened, his chest heavy with fear and wonder. He knew that one breath could end him or transform him beyond recognition. The air grew still, dense, waiting for his answer. Somewhere in the quiet, his mind began to fade, replaced by a sensation deeper than thought, a knowing that choices like this were never about life or death, but about whether a soul was ready to remember what it truly was. The light flickered again, brighter this time, stretching toward him in slow, deliberate motion. The hum reached a pitch so high it was almost silence. Michael inhaled shakily, feeling warmth gather behind his ribs. He didn't know if it was courage or surrender, only that the next breath would not belong to him alone. The air between them shimmered with unseen power, and the universe itself seemed to lean closer, waiting to see if man would share his breath with the divine. The light in the room deepened until it felt like liquid, heavy and radiant, pressing against Michael's skin. The hum that had once been soft and distant was now all around him, vibrating through the air, through the walls, through his bones. Time no longer existed as separate moments, but as one continuous breath drawn by the universe itself. Elyon stood before him, a silhouette of trembling brilliance, his form almost gone, his outline blurring like mist in sunlight. The air between them pulsed gently, asking, not demanding, for surrender. Michael exhaled and allowed it. The decision was not spoken, not reasoned. It happened like gravity, a falling that felt inevitable. The moment he opened himself, the light reached forward, entering him with a softness that belied its magnitude. It wasn't like inhaling air. It was like inhaling existence. His lungs filled with radiance that was neither hot nor cold but impossibly alive. The breath expanded through him, flowing past the limits of his body, through every cell, every strand of thought, every memory he had ever carried. Then the boundaries vanished. The floor beneath him dissolved. His body ceased to be something separate from the air. His heartbeat merged with the hum until it was no longer his heartbeat, but the pulse of everything. He saw atoms, billions of them, swirling in luminous choreography, their motion not random but musical. They sang in frequencies of color he had no words for, harmonies that built galaxies. He saw the spiral arms of those galaxies twist through eternity, each one moving in the same rhythm that now lived inside his chest. He realized they were breathing too, worlds inhaling and exhaling in cosmic sync, every star a lung in the body of God. He drifted further outward or inward. He couldn't tell. There was no direction, only expansion. He saw life as waves, endless and continuous, rising and falling in the same ocean of energy. Every soul that had ever existed shimmered there, not as separate beings but as ripples of a single field, expressions of one vast consciousness breathing itself into infinite forms. The dead were not gone. The living were not separate. Every thought, every heartbeat, every whisper of wind was a syllable in the same divine exhalation. And then he saw the pattern, the breath itself woven into the fabric of existence. It was not symbolic, it was physical. A rhythm encoded into the pulse of matter. Jesus had not brought it from the heavens, he had become it. The crucifixion was the moment the breath harmonized with the frequency of flesh, a divine waveform resonating through every atom of life. Elyon's people had called it the transference, the instant when the universe remembered how to breathe through consciousness. Michael felt it moving through him now. His neurons flared with light, his mind unfolding into layers that had no name. He could feel thoughts from beyond himself. Elyon's, humanity's, even the whisper of the planet beneath his feet. Everything was connected, every vibration a note in the same eternal hymn. There was no death here, no isolation, only continuity. When the breath completed, the light began to settle, folding itself back into stillness. Michael collapsed to his knees, trembling but alive. The hum receded, leaving only a soft resonance that pulsed faintly within his chest. He understood then why Elyon had called it the breath of Jesus. It was not religion, not miracle, but the architecture of creation itself. The divine had never been a figure on a cross. It was the air within every living thing, the unseen rhythm holding galaxies together, the inhale and exhale of infinity. The light did not fade immediately. It hovered in the air like mist suspended between worlds, shimmering faintly with hues no spectrum could contain. Michael's eyes were open, but sight had lost its meaning. He was no longer looking at the room, at Elyon, or even at himself. He was gazing through existence, through the invisible lattice that connected every heartbeat of creation. The breath still pulsed faintly within him, the residue of that impossible exchange. It was as if the universe had inhaled through his lungs, and now, in the stillness that followed, it began to exhale. He felt the current move outward, slow at first, then infinitely fast. Space folded and unfolded, time expanding like ripples from a single point. The world beneath him stretched into patterns, lines, and spirals, fractal shapes of light weaving through history. He saw Earth's timeline branching in all directions, not as a straight thread but as a living organism, breathing through epochs. Each exhale of the human race birthed another layer of reality, another reflection of itself. Wars, prayers, love, despair, all were vibrations rippling through the same divine lung. He watched as the first humans carved fire from stone, their breath mingling with the smoke that rose toward the heavens. That single act of creation sent a wave forward in time, shaping civilizations yet unborn. He saw prophets inhale that same air, their words resonating through centuries. He saw children take their first breaths beside the dying, the cycle never ceasing, always folding back into itself. Humanity was not a sequence of lives but a single organism inhaling and exhaling across millennia. The vision expanded further. He saw empires rise and collapse, their final size transforming into the seeds of new worlds. He saw every prayer uttered into the darkness become light, not disappearing but fracturing into countless universes where those words became reality. Every act of cruelty, every moment of mercy, every love confessed, and every grief endured, all were shaping futures beyond comprehension. The pattern became clearer. Each universe that existed was born from the exhale of the one before it. Humanity's collective breath was not bound to this earth alone. Every choice, every emotion released into the air became a vibration that rippled beyond the edge of known reality, giving birth to parallel worlds, echoes of decisions made and unmade. There were worlds where humanity ascended, others where it destroyed itself, and countless others in between. They all existed simultaneously, reflections in an infinite mirror, each aware of the other through resonance rather than sight. Michael realized then that creation was recursive. The universe did not begin once it was constantly beginning. Every breath taken by a conscious being was a miniature genesis, a spark igniting endless possibility. The divine did not create the world and step away. It continued creating through the living, through every inhale and exhale of existence. The light around him pulsed one final time, and in that pulse, he saw his own reflection stretching into eternity, countless versions of himself, some alive, some yet unborn, all breathing the same sacred air. He understood now that there was no separation between the Creator and the created. The breath of Jesus was not a gift given to humanity. It was humanity itself, the echo of a divine respiration that had never stopped. When the vision finally dimmed, Michael felt the weight of that knowledge settle into him like gravity. The air in the room felt heavier, thicker with meaning. The world he had known was just one reflection among countless others, each shaping the next with every breath. The mirror of creation stretched endlessly before him, and he was both the reflection and the one gazing into it. The vision dissolved like mist, retreating from dawn. The colors bled into gray, the soundless hum faded into a fragile quiet, and for the first time since the beginning of the encounter, Michael felt the weight of the physical world return. His body was trembling, every muscle weak, his chest burning with an ache that felt both human and cosmic. The air was dense, heavy with residue from the light, as though the universe itself had exhaled and forgotten to inhale again. He blinked, trying to refocus, but the room around him seemed unfamiliar, distorted by the memory of eternity. Elyon stood a few feet away, or rather what remained of him did. His once radiant body had dimmed to a faint glimmer, translucent like smoke caught in a dying flame. The wings of light that had once filled the space were now no more than fragile arcs fading into the air. His form flickered with every pulse, his edges unraveling into particles that shimmered briefly before vanishing. Michael understood immediately, without words, that the being was dying not in agony or fear, but in the way a candle dies when its purpose is complete. The hum that once filled the air had become faint, almost imperceptible, and yet Michael could still feel it echoing inside him. A warmth pulsed behind his ribs, gentle but steady, like a secondary heartbeat. Elyon's eyes, if they could still be called, that glowed faintly. Two small orbs of light suspended within the fading shape of his face. Their brilliance was not pain, it was peace. The meaning entered Michael's mind without sound. The cycle was complete. The breath, the resonance that had been lost for millennia, had been seeded again. Elyon's purpose was fulfilled. What once flowed through the stars now lived within human form. The vibration that had sustained galaxies, that had harmonized the living and the divine, was now part of Michael's being. His every breath carried an echo of it, a fragment of the infinite. Elyon's presence grew fainter, but his message became clearer, sharper, woven directly into the rhythm of Michael's heartbeat. Guard it. Teach them to remember. Michael felt tears well in his eyes, though he could not fully comprehend why. The sorrow was immense, but beneath it was awe, pure, wordless awe. The air shimmered faintly as Elyon's form continued to dissolve. Light spilled from him in gentle waves, drifting upward like dust caught in sunlight. Every particle seemed alive, whispering in a language too deep for sound. The house, the world, even the night beyond the windows seemed to hold its breath in reverence. The final moment arrived quietly. Elyon's outline broke apart completely, becoming a field of glowing fragments suspended in the air. They moved slowly, spiraling in graceful patterns before scattering through the room like seeds carried by invisible wind. Each fragment touched a surface, the floor, the walls, the air, and sank into it, disappearing as though absorbed by reality itself. One piece, the last and brightest, drifted toward Michael and rested lightly against his chest before vanishing within him. The hum returned, softer now, no longer coming from outside but from within. It resonated through his lungs, his veins, his very thoughts. Elyon's light was gone, but his essence remained, woven into Michael's breath, into the rhythm of life itself. The house felt different, emptier, yet sacred, as though it had witnessed something divine. Michael stood alone in the silence, though it no longer felt lonely. The world beyond the walls stirred faintly, the whisper of wind, the cry of a distant bird, but all of it now seemed part of the same rhythm, connected to the same pulse. The warmth in his chest expanded once more, and he knew, beyond reason, that Elyon was not gone. The being had not died but transformed, scattered into resonance, waiting to awaken in others. He inhaled deeply, the air carrying the faintest trace of light, and felt the breath move through him. It was calm, infinite, alive. He understood his task now, not to preach, not to prove, but to help humanity remember what it had forgotten. The divine had not left. It had only fallen silent, waiting for someone to teach the world how to breathe again. Morning arrived slowly, as if the sun itself was hesitant to intrude upon what the night had witnessed. The horizon glowed faintly with pale light, seeping through the cracks of the curtains and spilling across the wooden floor. The air was still thick, humming faintly with the residue of something vast and unnameable. Michael sat in the quiet, his body heavy, his mind drifting between awe and disbelief. The warmth within his chest still pulsed softly, steady as a second heart. Elyon's presence was barely visible now. The shape that had once filled the room with celestial brilliance was reduced to a fragile shimmer, a silhouette unraveling thread by thread. The air around him vibrated faintly, distorting light like heat rising from desert sand. Each breath Michael took seemed to quicken the unraveling, as though the universe itself were reclaiming what it had lent. Elyon's glow flickered once, and then again, weaker each time. Outside, the first bird sang. The sound pierced the silence like a reminder that the ordinary world still existed, unchanged and unaware. The hum that had filled the house for hours began to fade, replaced by a soft crackling sound, faint but steady. Michael watched as Elyon's form began to dissolve completely. It did not collapse or vanish in sudden violence. It came apart slowly, deliberately, like mist being drawn upward by invisible wind. The light that composed his body turned to vapor, drifting toward the ceiling before dispersing into nothingness. A faint scent filled the air, something sharp yet clean, metallic and sweet at once. Ozone. It was the smell of lightning without the storm, of air newly born. Michael recognized it instinctively as a signature of what had just transpired, the trace of an energy too pure to belong to this world. He inhaled deeply, and for a moment, the scent made him dizzy. It carried with it echoes of the hum, like a memory embedded in the air. Then, in the place where Elyon had stood, something remained. Amid the faint shimmer of vanishing light, a single object lingered, suspended just above the ground. It rotated slowly, catching the morning sun that filtered through the window. It was small, no larger than a feather, but it was made of something that was not metal, nor crystal, nor any substance Michael had ever seen. It looked like a shard of glass alive with light, thin and delicate, its edges rippling as though breathing. Michael approached cautiously, half afraid it would disappear if he moved too quickly. But it didn't. The shard hovered for a moment longer, then descended gently, settling on the floor without a sound. He knelt beside it, watching as its glow dimmed to a steady pulse. The light seemed to respond to him, flickering softly when he exhaled, brightening when he inhaled. It was alive, resonating with the rhythm of his breath. He reached out and touched it. The surface was cool, smooth, yet it vibrated faintly under his fingers, as though the heartbeat of the universe had been condensed into this fragment. A faint hum returned one note, sustained and pure. It wasn't just sound, it was meaning. The shard was a remnant of Elyon, a seed of what had been shared. Outside, sunlight began to flood the room, painting the walls gold. Dust motes drifted in the light, swirling lazily around the shard. The hum softened until it became indistinguishable from the pulse in Michael's chest. He realized then that Elyon had not vanished completely. Part of him lingered, contained within that sliver of light, waiting for its purpose. Michael picked up the shard carefully. Its glow intensified for a heartbeat, then settled again, as though recognizing him. He held it to his chest and closed his eyes. The warmth of the breath stirred within him, aligning perfectly with the rhythm of the fragment. The connection was complete. Elyon's final act had not been to leave, but to anchor himself within the fabric of this world, through the one who had chosen to believe. As the morning light filled the room, the scent of ozone lingered for a while longer. Faint, but persistent, a reminder that something sacred had happened there. When the air finally cleared, the house fell silent once more. Only the shard of light remained, resting in Michael's palm, glowing faintly like the last echo of a divine exhale that refused to fade. The days that followed were quiet, too quiet, as if the world itself had taken a deep breath and forgotten how to exhale. The hum that had once lived in every corner of the house was gone. The air was still again, heavy with the weight of ordinary silence. Morning light filtered through the curtains as it always had, but something about it felt wrong. Thinner somehow, stripped of meaning. Michael moved through the rooms like a ghost in his own life, half expecting to hear the faint vibration return, half terrified that it never would. When the authorities came, their arrival shattered that fragile silence. They asked their questions with practiced calm, eyes glancing toward the room where it had all happened. The smell of ozone had long faded, leaving behind only the faint scent of dust and wood polish. The officers found nothing unusual, no body, no light, no trace of anything that defied explanation. Their instruments picked up no radiation, no heat residue, nothing that could justify the things Michael described. They called it a reaction to trauma, exhaustion, maybe a hallucination amplified by stress and lack of sleep. Friends visited in waves. Their voices were soft, careful, the way people speak to someone they're afraid might break. They listened as he tried to explain what had happened, but their eyes betrayed pity, not belief. They told him that he had been working too much, that losing patience every week had taken its toll, that the mind could create anything when grief and exhaustion met. He wanted to argue, to tell them that what he saw was more real than any waking moment he had ever known. But the words dissolved before leaving his mouth. He showed them the equipment, the monitors, the cameras, the EEG machine that had once recorded impossible light. Now every screen was blank. When he tried to replay the data, every file was corrupted. The folders still existed, but their contents were static. Hours of recordings, all reduced to a single pattern, white noise broken only by faint breathing, rhythmic, deliberate, not his own. No matter which file he opened, the sound was the same. It came in cycles of 7 seconds, inhale, exhale, like an echo that refused to die. Michael replayed the sound late at night, over and over, hoping to find something hidden in it. The longer he listened, the more uncertain he became. The breathing was faint, but oddly human. Sometimes, when the static softened, he could almost hear words buried deep within the noise. They were never clear enough to understand, but they carried the same cadence as Elyon's voice. Each time he pressed play, the doubt within him deepened. Was it proof? Or was it delusion, preserving its own mythology? Sleep became elusive. He would wake in the early hours, convinced that someone was standing at the edge of his bed, though every time he looked, the room was empty. The shard of light he had kept by his bedside still glowed faintly, but even that glow seemed weaker now, as if it too had begun to question its existence. He wondered if belief was what sustained it, and if his growing doubt was dimming the last trace of Elyon. Days blurred together. The voices of reason around him grew louder, echoing phrases of skepticism until they began to sound like truth. Yet every time he took a breath, he felt something stirred deep within his chest, a warmth that pulsed softly, quietly, insistently. It reminded him that the impossible had not been imagined. Still, the human mind is fragile, and faith, once fractured, rarely returns whole. The recordings played one final time that night. The static was harsher now, but the breathing remained. As he listened, the rhythm aligned perfectly with his own. He realized then that the question was no longer whether Elyon had been real. It was whether the universe had entrusted him with something no one else would ever believe. And as the last trace of sound faded into silence, he couldn't tell which terrified him more, the possibility that it was all real, or the chance that it wasn't. Weeks passed, and the hum of ordinary life returned with cruel persistence. The world outside had moved on, untouched by revelation. The news still spoke of politics, storms, and markets. No one whispered of beings made of light or of the breath that shaped the cosmos. Michael tried to fit back into that world, but every routine felt hollow. Each conversation was an echo of a language that no longer reached him. The shard of glass he kept by his bedside still glowed faintly, though its light was softer now, like a heartbeat hidden beneath layers of sleep. He returned to work at the hospice, the one place where the veil between life and death had always felt thin. The air in those rooms was familiar, sterile, quiet, heavy, with the smell of antiseptic and endings. Yet now he felt something different moving beneath it, an invisible rhythm pulsing between the steady beeps of heart monitors. He began to wonder if he could hear the breath even here, in the fragile exhalations of those about to cross over. The experiment began in secret. It was not science, not faith, but something in between, a test of belief. With each new patient whose time was near, Michael found himself repeating the pattern Elyon had taught him. He instructed them to breathe slowly, to follow a rhythm of 7 counts, to imagine light flowing through their chest and leaving through the crown of their head. He never spoke of aliens or angels or universal resonance. He told them simply that it would ease their transition, that it might bring them peace. At first, nothing happened. Days passed. Patients died as patients always did, some in silence, some in pain, some refusing to go. He told himself it had all been imagination, the fevered hallucination of an exhausted man. But then, something changed. One evening, as an elderly woman slipped into her final moments, she whispered through trembling lips that she could see someone standing at the foot of her bed. Michael froze. She described him as tall, surrounded by light that moved like breath, blue and gold interwoven. He asked softly what the figure's name was. Her eyes, glassy and half-closed, flickered with the faintest spark of recognition. "Elyon," she said, before her final breath escaped like a sigh of release. Michael felt the air shift. The machines around her flickered once before falling silent. It was not death that filled the room, it was stillness. Sacred and absolute. The reports multiplied. Other patients, guided through the same breathing pattern, began to describe identical experiences. A farmer from the outskirts of town saw a being made of light who spoke in pure thought. A young woman, moments before her pulse faded, said she felt her chest open like a gate of gold. A child, pale and feverish, smiled just before the monitors went flat, whispering, "He's here." Every time, the name returned Elyon. Michael recorded every word, every pulse, every fluctuation in the machines. The data made no sense. Electrical readings spiked seconds before death, and the temperature in the rooms dropped inexplicably. Cameras captured only static, but the audio always preserved one sound, the faint echo of synchronized breathing. 7 counts in and 7 counts out. The staff began to talk, quietly at first. They said strange things happened when Michael was on duty. They said his rooms felt different, peaceful, as if the dying left without fear. Some whispered that he prayed over them, though he denied it. He didn't pray. He remembered. Late at night, when the halls emptied and the lights dimmed, he would stand by the window, breathing in the same pattern, feeling the warmth rise in his chest. The world outside looked unchanged, but beneath its silence, he could feel it again, the vibration. Faint, yet spreading. The breath was moving, passing from one dying body to the next, awakening a memory that had slept for millennia. He realized then that this was the true test of belief, not in Elyon, not in religion, but in the invisible rhythm that bound all living things. And as he exhaled into the night, the glass shard on his desk glowed softly in response, as though the universe itself were breathing back. Years passed in quiet ripples, each one carrying Michael further from the night when light walked into his home. The world had changed around him, but he had not followed its rhythm. He lived simply, quietly. A man who smiled often, yet spoke little. To most, he was a kind old nurse who had spent his life comforting the dying. Few knew that within the calm surface of his gaze lived a memory of eternity. The shard of light, still faintly glowing after all those years, remained by his bedside, a fragment of something infinite, hidden in the ordinary glow of morning. The breath never left him. It softened with time. No longer a thunderous revelation, but a gentle pulse woven into every inhale. He felt it in the wind through the trees, in the rhythm of rain against his window, in the faint echo of laughter from strangers on the street. It was everywhere, subtle but unending. When he guided patients through their final breaths, he no longer spoke of peace or heaven. He simply taught them how to breathe, slowly and fully, to find the rhythm that carried them across the invisible threshold. Many left this world smiling, their final expressions serene, as if the same presence that once visited him still waited at the edge of their vision. Now the years had caught up. The room was quiet except for the low hum of machines. His hair had turned white, his hands frail, yet the warmth in his chest still pulsed steadily. Softer now, but unmistakable. Outside the window, morning light filtered through the thin curtains, painting everything in gold. He knew his time had come. There was no fear. Death was not an ending, only another rhythm in the eternal song. He closed his eyes and began to breathe in the pattern that had changed everything. 7 counts in, 7 counts out. With each breath, the world around him seemed to grow distant. The heart monitor slowed, its beeps stretching further apart until they merged with the rhythm of his lungs. A faint light began to shimmer at the edge of his vision. Not from the machines, not from the sun, but from within. The warmth that had lived in his chest all these years began to rise, expanding outward. It spread through his veins, through the air, through the silence. The room brightened, not with fire or brilliance, but with a quiet illumination that seemed to breathe. The lines on the monitor flattened, holding steady in stillness. The nurses who entered moments later would later say they saw the air shimmer for just an instant, as if the light in the room had bent toward him. Then, the impossible happened. The monitor flickered once, the line pulsing upward, before falling silent again. His final exhale left his lips like a sigh, but it did not fade, it glowed. A faint wisp of light drifted upward, spreading through the air like smoke made of dawn. It lingered for a heartbeat, then dissolved, leaving only a warmth that filled the room. The machines were silent, but the air hummed faintly, with a tone too low to be sound. Somewhere unseen, the rhythm continued. It moved through the walls, through the air, through the world itself. It touched the lungs of a sleeping child, the waves on a distant shore, the quiet heart of someone praying for a loved one to stay. The breath had not died with him, it had returned to where it belonged, woven once again into the pulse of the living. In the stillness that followed, the shard by his bedside brightened one last time, casting soft light across his peaceful face before fading into darkness. The hum lingered, quiet but infinite, as the universe inhaled once more and remembered how to breathe.